Hi everyone, and welcome to Cloud Lunch and Learn sessions. My name is Dana, and we're kicking off our Azure security series with our very first session. We have Wim with us, and he'll be explaining how to get you started with security in Azure. So please feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and we'll be having a Q&A section at the end. So I'll hand it over to you, Wim.
Thank you, Dana. So welcome everyone to this first session in the Cloud Lunch and Learn Azure Security series. Today's session is titled, Let's Get You Started with Security in Azure. During the rest of this month, each time, also on a Friday, there will be another session in this series. You can see the schedule on the slide. The session of today is kind of an intro and an overall view, where the other sessions will more focus on specific topics which can be secured in your Azure environment. Before starting off, I first want to thank Dana and Hugo and the other members of the Cloud and Lunch and Learn team for setting up this concept and for inviting me to deliver some talks around securing your Azure environment. So my name is Wim Matthijssen. I live in Belgium and I work as a cloud architect. In my daily job, I'm completely focused on Azure and the related Azure hybrid services. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer. So I also deliver all kinds of Azure trainings. Since the beginning of this year, I'm also a founding board member of a new Belgium user group called MC2MC, which stands for Microsoft Cloud and Client Management Community. And it's a user group focusing on Azure and the complete Microsoft 365 stack. Since July of this year, I'm also awarded as a Microsoft Azure MVP, which was a real honor for me. Like most IT professionals these days, I'm also on Twitter and on LinkedIn. So if you ever want to reach out or just want to say hi or ask a question, you can always contact me through my Twitter handle or LinkedIn. They're also on the slide. Next to that, I also have my own blog, https://wmatthijssen.com, where I blog a lot about my daily experience with Azure and all related Microsoft hybrid cloud services. I think that's me in a nutshell. So on the agenda today, first, I will look at why cloud security matters and why you should keep it in mind while architecting and deploying your Azure environment and all its resources. Then I will focus on specific Azure security topics like secure Azure identities, Azure governance, secure Azure management, Azure data security, and secure Azure IaaS connectivity. At the end of the session, I will also go through the key takeaways to focus on the things you should really remember about this session. And like Dana already said, completely at the end, I think we probably will still have some time for a Q&A, where I would love to answer any of your questions. So let us get started. Cloud security, you say? So in this modern hybrid cloud world, many companies are moving a lot of their on-premises resources and workloads to Azure. And just like on-premises, this new cloud ecosystem needs protection to prevent it not only from breaches, but also from ransomware and other malicious invaders. But cloud security is fundamentally a new landscape for many of those companies. While many of the security principles remain the same as on-premise, the implementation is often very different. As a good security base, there are 5 fundamental practices every company can maintain to uplift their cloud security. And those focus on identity and access control, security posture management, apps and data security, threat protection, and last but not least, network security. Most of these fundamentals will be completely or partially covered during this session or in the other sessions later on in the series. So these days, the cloud security challenges for most companies still are focused around 3 points. First of all, most companies still don't have enough visibility in their security and compliance. Most of the time, this is because they don't have the necessary security controls in place. And that's why a lot of the breaches still take months or longer to be really discovered. Most companies also still have a lot of insecure configurations, which can lead to those breaches, like unpatched systems or systems without any antivirus, or services with management ports widely opened on the internet. And these days, all cyber attacks are also increased in numbers, and the attacks itself are more sophisticated, which also leads to more successful breaches these days. Those breaches and attacks itself can then lead to downtime mostly. And the cost of downtime is something every business would like to avoid. And that's why foreseeing a good security base really matters. Because going down as a company, for example, 3 days because your cloud workloads and data can't be accessed anymore can lead to a big cost. And this not only for your business and your brand, but also for you as a cloud or Azure admin. I think you really don't want to be the person responsible to let the complete company suffer downtime. And this because you didn't foresee the necessary security for all your cloud workloads. I think it would really impact your job and probably also your future IT career. So as an Azure administrator these days, you should try to follow a zero trust model, a ZTM, because in most companies these days, you do not only have to support access to data and services from inside the corporate firewall, but also from outside it. And by applying a zero trust model, you never assume trust, but instead you continually validate trust. You will rely on variable user and device trust claims. It will grant not only access to resources based on both of those. In this way, a trust is no longer assumed just based on the location inside of your organization's perimeter, but also from the outside. And this because most of your users now also access apps and data from the internet, like, for example, your Azure workloads. So like I already said before, as an Azure administrator, you're not only responsible for building, managing, automating, and optimizing your Azure workloads, but also to secure and protect them. Because the cloud, Azure, and your Azure resources really don't run themselves. Depending in which cloud service model you run your workloads, is it IaaS, is it PaaS, serverless, or even SaaS, there will be always a shared responsibility where Microsoft will manage everything till a certain point, but you as an Azure admin also have some responsibility. Is it managing your IaaS VMs by foreseeing them from Windows updates, antivirus, or backup, or only the database and the data when you run Azure SQL databases? You always should really keep in mind that there always will be a shared responsibility. So as a first topic, let us now take a look at how you can secure Azure identities so you're able to remain in control of them. Just for clarification, because I still see and hear some people not really understanding the difference between Active Directory domain services and Azure Active Directory. Azure AD is a cloud-based identity and access management service, but it's not simply a cloud version of Active Directory domain service, as the name might suggest. Although it performs some of the same functions, it's quite different. Azure AD is a secure authentication store, which can contain users and groups and allows you to create and identify for your applications. Besides seamlessly connected to a Microsoft Online service, Azure AD can connect to thousands of SaaS applications, like, for example, Salesforce, Slack, and so on, using single sign-on. When you compare it with AD, there are some things Azure AD doesn't do. You can't join a server to it. There's no group policy. There's no support for LDAP, NTLM, or Kerberos. It's kind of a flat directory structure without OUs and forests. You can see Azure AD doesn't replace AD, but AD and Azure AD complement each other, so they fulfill each other. Let us now look at some user accounts in your Azure environments, which you should be careful with or should be used for specific actions. First of all, you have the global administrator, or global admin, like they say. Users with this role have access to all administrative features in Azure AD. And as a global admin, for example, you can reset passwords for all users, add and manage domains, and regain access to an Azure subscription or management group when a user has lost access. You should keep in mind that you should assign the global admin role only to users who need this global access and who need to manage features and data across all your Microsoft Online services. The recommendation from Microsoft is that you have a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 4 global admins. Also, keep in mind that a person who signed up for a Microsoft Online service, like for example, signs up for an Azure subscription or Office 365 or creates a new tenant, automatically becomes a global admin. So keep that in mind. If all your subscriptions are made by another person, probably your global admin list will fill up with more than 4 global admins. So keep that one in mind. So then we also have a break glass account. So for securing your environment, MFA is one of those things you should enable to better protect your identities. But what when MFA malfunctions and you're not able to log in anymore into the Azure portal? You can solve this by creating 2, maximum 3 emergency access, or like some people say, break glass accounts. You should only use these accounts in case of an emergency and only when it's absolutely necessary. This account should be a cloud-only account who uses the onmicrosoft.com domain, and they should not be federated or synchronized with any on-premise environment. These accounts also should have the global admin role, and you should also exclude them from MFA or any conditional access policies you have. You should use a long and complex password for them, at least 16 characters long, but in my opinion, it's better to go for 128 randomly generated characters to make it even more secure. You should also monitor these. Oh, sorry, one click too fast. Let me go back. So you should also monitor these accounts with, for example, MCAS or Azure AD Audit. And this to get notified in the unlucky event that an attacker has breached one of those accounts and tries to use them. So because they're not protected with MFA or any conditional access policies. So then to go ahead with Azure AD conditional access, like I already said in the intro, the modern cloud perimeter now extends beyond your organization's network, and it's best to apply a zero trust model. A tool or service that can help you with this is conditional access. Conditional access, for people who don't know it, is an Active Directory tool that you can use to manage and control access to all your corporate resources. If they're not on premises or in Azure, it really doesn't matter. At their simplest, conditional access policies are if-then statements. So if a user wants access to a resource, then he must fulfill a complete an action. So conditional access gives you the possibility to make automated access control decisions based on conditions for accessing any of your cloud apps. So let me give an example. A security engineer wants to access a security application in your Azure environment, and he's required to perform multi-factor authentication to be able to access it. So if he doesn't use MFA, he's not able to open the stat-specific application. And you can make conditional access policies for whatever the topic you want to add. You should keep in mind that to use conditional access, you need to have an Azure AD Premium P1 license or a Microsoft 365 Premium license. So if you have one of both, you can start using conditional access in your environment. So if you look more into protecting your Azure environment, access management for your Azure resources is also an important security aspect you need to take care of. Luckily, with Azure role-based access control, RBAC, like they say, you can control who has access to your Azure resources, what they can do with it, in what areas they have access to. Currently, there are around 70+ building roles that you can use. but you can also configure your own custom rules. My advice is if you start building custom rules, copy a building role and copy it, and then make the changes you want to do. Don't start a complete role, a custom role from scratch, because probably you will miss something, and it's a lot easier to start from a building role. You can apply RBAC to different scopes, like there is a management group, a subscription, a resource group, or even a specific resource. You should always implement the least privileged access model. So you just give users the minimum access they need to fulfill their tasks. An example from when you might use RBAC is to allow one user to manage the VMs in a subscription, and to allow another user to only manage all virtual networks, for example. So we can also take RBAC to the next level. And that's with Azure AD Privileged Identity Management, or PIM. It's another access management server that you can use. PIM is a service that helps you better protect your privileged identities, like, for example, your global admins. PIM enables you to manage, control, and monitor access to important resources. So not only for Azure AD or Azure resources, but also for resources from the other Microsoft Online services, such as Office 365 or even Intune. And it will provide you with time-based and approval-based role activation, which will help you to mitigate the risk of unnecessary or misused access permissions. Of course, to use PIM, you also must have a valid license. This can be an Azure AD Premium P2 license, an EMS E5 license, a Microsoft 365 Education A5 license, or a Microsoft 365 Enterprise E5 license. Sorry. So if you have one of those, you can start using PIM. So I think that you can already see, with everything already mentioned, managing identity security for your Azure environment can be difficult. Luckily, you can now also simply enable Azure AD security defaults, which make it easier to help protect from identity-related attacks, and this with pre-configured settings recommended by Microsoft. Like there are, for example, requiring all users to register for Azure MFA, or blocking legacy authentication protocols, and also protecting privileged activities like access to the Azure Portal. The only thing you should be aware of is that if you're already using conditional access and have any conditional access policies enabled in your environment, you won't be able to use or enable security defaults. So with this, it's time for a first short demo. So let me open my Azure Portal and close the screen. So I think everybody's seeing my Azure Portal for the moment. Let us take a look at the global administrators. So you can go into your Azure Active Directory. Let it load. You can go to roles and administrators. You can see that my role currently is global admin. If you want to see who else is global administrator, you just type in global admin, it filters it, it's opening, you can click on it, and you can see those two users have a global admin role. So I have less than 3 or 4 global admins, so that's okay. If you want to look at the description, which actions and role permissions this specific user has, you can open it, you can see it, and down over here, you can see all role permissions. And in case of a global admin, it's everything you can have. So it's quite filled. So if you want to enable, for example, the security defaults, we're still in our Azure Active Directory blade. You can go down, click on the properties over here. You click on it, completely go down to the screen. You can see the manage security defaults. This one, just click on it. And you can see enable security defaults. In my environment, I'm not using conditional access, so it's already enabled. I will be in front. If you have conditional access, you're not able to move this slider to no or yes. So in my environment, they're already enabled. One special thing I want to mention, as a global admin, you can also give you extra elevated rights. So you can make yourself a user access, sorry, let me do it like this one. You can give yourself user access administrator rights by putting this one on yes. And then you, for example, can even change, if you go into management group, the tenant's root group name. So then you have some extra rights where you can manage all management groups in a tenant until the top level. So let me go back to the slides and share my screen again. There it is. So as a second topic, I want to talk a little bit about what is Azure governance and how it can really help you to remain in control of your Azure environment. So why do you need Azure governance? First of all, when a proper Azure governance model is followed, you can ensure that your teams are operating in a secure and compliant Azure environment. And in this way, you can minimize the operational risks, and can it help you to remain in control of all your Azure resources? Next to that, it will also complete your cloud strategy and will give you the ability to not only reduce complexity, to reduce costs by reducing your monthly cloud spend and by preventing cloud sprawl, but it will also foresee you with a better security-based foundation for your complete Azure environment and all its Azure resources. So what can we do with it? It can be described as a collection of concepts, mechanisms, tools, and services designed to enable management at scale and to enforce compliance within your Azure environments. It can help you to organize and structure your Azure environments, and this with the use of management and resource group, for example. With the use of strict naming conventions and resource tags, you can better standardize and define all your Azure resources. It can also help you to control access with the use of RBAC, which I already talked before in the previous part. And it can help you with controlling and managing your costs in your Azure environment with the use of Azure Cost Management and Azure Advisor. You can also query and analyze all your Azure resources with Azure Resource Graph, for example. And last but not least, you can also enforce policies with Azure Policy. So Azure Policy, in my opinion, is one of the most important services that should be used as a part of your Azure governance strategy. So Azure Policy is an Azure service that helps you to enforce organizational standards and to assess compliance at scale. In some way, you can look at it like you use group policy for your on-premise environments in the past. Common use cases for Azure Policy include implementing governance for resource consistency, security, cost, and management. Policy definitions for those common use cases are available in your Azure environment as a built-in to already help you get started. On the screen, you can see some examples where Azure Policy helps you to control your cost and security by setting up specific policies to implement a guardrail of your environment. For example, you can set a policy which allows the deployment of certain VM sizes, or one that restricts the creation of public IPs, for example, or one where you specify that Azure Backup should be enabled for VMs, so people can't deploy or set up new VMs without Azure Backup already enabled. So it's a good tool and service to use. So let me go to my Azure portal again and show you some things. So management groups, let me open it, is a good way to organize your subscriptions. These days, a lot of companies have more than one subscription. And if you want to manage them at another level, at a higher level, you can start using management groups to make your to map your organizational hierarchy into Azure, or to combine. You can combine it with and other structures you want to use. So for example, you have development environments, you have production environments, you have QA or pre-prod environments. You can all map this in management groups. So these are my management groups. So you see, I've based them on a country, then for the IT department, and then I split it up in a different environments I have. So you can see it over here, those ones. So for example, I have my productions, and under my production, yeah, this one is placed wrong. I have my 2 production subscriptions, for example. Sometimes it's really difficult to get a good overview of all your management groups and all subscriptions. There is a little trick for it to make it a lot easier. So if you go to Azure Security Center, you click on Security Policy. When it opens, you can see a tree hierarchy of all your management groups with all subscriptions. So you can see which subscription is placed under which management group. The thing you can do with your management group is on a specific management group. Let me take this one. My marker isn't working anymore, so we'll do it without it. So let me take this one. If I click on the details, you can see for all subscriptions beneath this specific management group, I can set role-based access controls, I can set specific policies, and I can arrange the cost analysis. So it's an easy way to do subscription management at scale. Let me also look at resource tags, for example. So you go to the global search bar in the middle, you can type in tags, open your tags. You can see I already have a complete list. It's working in, luckily. I have a whole list of tags already. A tag always exists out of a name and a value. So for example, if you want to know which departments are responsible for which parts in your Azure environment, they need to pay the bill in the end. You can tag every resource with a name of cost center and a value of the name of the department. And at the end of the month, you can go into your Azure cost management and map it specific to the departments, which resources they need to pay for. So that's a good thing to use. Can also show you Azure Policy. So let me go. You also go to the global search bar again. You can type in Azure Policy, click on Policy. It will open. You can already see I have a specific one over here, which allows the locations. This one. If you want to create a new one, just click on Assignments. It will open. Assign a policy. You choose a specific scope. You can use a specific management group. Let me take the root management group. You go to in the policy definition. Over here, you can exclude any resource group or specific subscription you don't want the policy that apply to. In the policy definitions, you can type in a specific policy you're looking for. Let us do one for specific frame sizes. Type in SKU. Allowed virtual machine size SKUs. Select that one. You can fill in an description. Let me say demo. Then go to next. Over here, you can select the specific SKUs. Let us click on some just to show. It's just for a demo. Then click on next. You can start remediation. I don't want to do this, so I go to the next step and I start creating, and a new policy is created, which allows me to control which VM sizes can be deployed within my environment. So let me go back to the slides and share the screen again. So as a third topic, I want to look at some tools and services you can add to your security toolbox. So nowadays, you already have a lot of ways to securely manage your Azure resources. First of all, you have the Azure Portal. You just need to open a browser and go to portal.azure.com, sign in with your Microsoft account or your corporate account with sufficient rights, and you can do all tasks with Azure resources which you're allowed to do. Next to the Azure Portal, you also have some specific portals. like the Azure Active Directory Admin Center, which you use if you only need to work with Azure AD or any Azure identities or cloud identities, sorry. You also have the preview portal, which will allow you to work with services which are still in preview or in beta. So I never use a preview portal to do production-related tasks. I only do it when I need to test some new services out or just want to go ahead with the latest releases in my Azure environment. Next to those portals, you also have the Azure mobile app, with which you can manage your Azure environment from your iPhone or Android, and which really can help you to do management-related tasks when you're, for example, on the road. With the mobile app, you can, for example, look at some monitor logs. You can start and stop VMs. And the app itself is available in the App Store in the Google Play. If you want to QR it from over the slide, you can do it. The QR code is over there. You also have the Azure Portal app. With the Azure Portal app, you can connect to the Azure Portal without the need of a browser. And this, for example, when you work with the Windows Server 2019 management server, you're probably not allowed to browse or to open a browser. So on this server, you can install the app and manage your Azure resources from there, because the look and feel is completely the same as when you're working in the Azure Portal, and everything you can do in the Azure Portal is also available in the Azure Portal app. So it's a nice tool. I don't use it a lot. I only use it at some companies at the management server because they're not allowed to browse. We also have a lot of other tools. Most familiar probably for everyone, Azure Cloud Shell. Azure Cloud Shell is an interactive authenticator browser accessible shell for managing your Azure resources directly from the Azure portal or through shell.azure.com. And these days, you can even use it directly from Visual Studio Code or Windows Terminal. So these days, I myself work a lot with Windows Terminal. For people who don't know it, Windows Terminal is available in the Microsoft Store. And the nice thing about working with it is that it allows you to use all your command line tools like Command Prompt, PowerShell, Azure Cloud Shell, and even VSL in multiple tabs next to each other in one terminal application. You also have the Microsoft Azure Storage Explorer, which is also these days directly integrated in the Azure portal. It's an application which can help you to easily access and manage your Azure storage accounts. And by that, also all data stored on them. Next to all those tools and portals, you also have some free Azure services which can really help you to manage, secure, and optimize your Azure resources. One of them is Azure Service Health. Azure Service Health is a service that will notify you of issues in the Azure backbone that have an impact on your Azure resources or services. It not only helps you to understand those issues, but also tells you what the impact is of those issues. It kind of gives you personalized guidance and support by keeping you informed how Microsoft is resolving the issue, and also keeps you informed when the issue is finally resolved. Next to that, it will also inform you about other service health events like plant maintenance and security and health advisories. So, for example, it can also inform you about when you exceed a specific quota, for example. Another great free service tool you can use is Azure Advisor. You can see it as your free personal in-house cloud consultant. It will give you personalized best practices to optimize and secure your Azure workloads, and this for all your Azure subscriptions. And it does this by using telemetry data gathered from various Azure Monitor services. Currently, there are 5 Azure Advisor dashboards which can help you. You have high availability, security. The security one is integrated with Azure Security Center. You also have performance, The last new one is operational excellence. And then finally also you have cost, which can help you to reduce your cloud spend, for example. So, and then also we have Azure Security Center. Azure Security Center is your main stop when you need a first broad overview of your Azure environment's security posture. It's available in a free and a standard tier. And if there's potential to improve your overall Azure Security Center will give you recommendations that explain how a specific resource can be better protected. And in addition to all that, you can also use it. You can also use its advanced features that assist you to detect and protect against threats. But most of those features are available in the standard tier, so you probably need to pay for them. Those features will bring additional intelligence and will help you to make easier decisions, and to drive your security to the next level. A new addition in Azure Security Center is automatic workflows, which allows you to automatically react and trigger workflows, and this based on certain conditions, like when there are alerts or security, for example, are generated that you receive an email or something, you can make a complete workflow out of it. So let me first drink a little bit. Sorry. So for the next demo, let me first go back to my Azure portal. I want to show you Azure Service Health and Azure Advisor. So Azure Service Health is standardly available in the sidebar. You can also go through it through the global search bar again. You can type it in, and it's also available on the dashboard normally with the heart with the monitoring. You can click on it. Let me do it from over here because this is a more closed view. Let me take this one. It's better. And you can see you have all the active events. So you can be informed by service use, plant maintenance, health advisories, and security advisories. So for the service issue, let me see if there is one for the moment. There is one. Let me open it. It's not opening. Why it's not opening? Let me open it a little bit there. Yeah. Let me go into the health history. That probably will work better. In the health history, you can go back 24 hours, a week, 2 weeks, a month, until up to 90 days. So let me select last 3 months. You can see a lot of service issues that have been activated. If you click on one, so let us select the first one. You have a summary of what the problem is. I hope the screen is big enough. So impacted services, for example, load balancer and virtual network. There's a link available. The impacted region, West Europe. The impacted subscription. There also, you can download the PDF with the complete issue summary. You can also click on the tab with the issue updates, which will explain what's wrong and how Microsoft finally fixed it. Another great thing you can do from inside the Service Health Blade is go to Resource Health. So, for example, you can select your different subscriptions. Let me select my product one. Let me, for example, select my storage accounts. So just go to the storage accounts. It's completely at the bottom over here. The nice thing, it will show all your storage accounts. So when there's something wrong with one of those storage accounts, you can directly see it from over here. And you don't need to open that specific resource in a separated place. So everything is okay now with my storage account, so I can close this one. You can also create a pinned roadmap from Service Health, where you can, this one over here. For example, you can see there's a specific health advisory at the moment, and you can see a little dot for the regions I selected and my subscriptions. So if something is wrong in a specific region and one of my subscription is in that region, that dot will show red, and then you directly know that there's something wrong and that you need to investigate it. So let us also look at Azure Advisor. So go back to the global search bar, stick in Advisor. Let us open it. So we can see the different tiles. You have, like I said, cost, security, reliability, operational excellence, and performance. It's still loading at the moment. So for example, if we click on the cost one, there's one impacted resource. It gives me, it points me out that there is a public IP address that's not associated. So I can click on the quick fix. I can directly see which IP address it is and what's the potential saving. I can also click on the recommended actions. I'm directly at the blades from the pip itself, and I can from over here can simply delete it, and it will save me 30 euros at the end just by opening Azure Advisor, going the cost blade, and just see what advice and recommendations it's delivering me. So if you go back to the Azure Advisor and, for example, go in the security ones, this one is also integrated with Azure Security Center in the back. It will give me security advices. For example, to install a monitoring agent on my virtual machines. So I have 3 virtual machines that don't have a monitoring agent, that have external accounts with owner permissions that should be removed. You can also postpone those recommendations if you don't want to see them or don't want to apply them. So it's not because it's there that you need to implement it. It's just a recommendation Microsoft delivers on best practices. So it's still up to you if you want to implement it or not. You can also download a CSV file of PDF. So if another person is responsible for that specific Azure resource, you can send them a PDF and try to ask him to get it fixed. So that's it for this demo. Let's go back to our slides. So the next topic I want to talk about is Azure data security to remain able to protect all your data in Azure. So an important thing to know is that there are different types of Azure storage resiliency solutions. Azure Storage allows you to enable those based on your specific availability needs. And by doing so, it stores multiple copies of your data so that it's protected from planned and unplanned events, like, for example, a network or power outage in one of the Azure data centers where your resources are located. First of all, you have locally redundant storage, LRS, which copies your data synchronously 3 times within a single physical location in a primary region. Then you have zone redundant storage, ZRS, which copies your data synchronously across 3 Azure availability zones in your primary region. You can also choose for geo-redundant storage or GRS, which first copies your data synchronously 3 times in a single physical region in the physical location in the primary region using LRS, and then it copies your data asynchronously to a single physical location in the secondary region. And finally, you also have, it's not on this slide, Geo Zone Redundant Storage, ZRS, which copies your data synchronously across 3 Azure availability zones in the primary region using ZRS. And then it copies your data asynchronously to a single physical location in the secondary region. And then to make it a little difficult anymore, with GRS and ZRS, you also have the ERA or read access option. And this to be able to also read the data in the secondary region. So you can see you have a lot of options you can choose between, all with the different price and availability. So really keep it in mind when you're designing a solution where you start using Azure Storage. To be able to be better help protect your data in the cloud, you also need to be aware of the possible states in which your data can occur. You have 2 data states, at rest and in transit. Data at rest means that your data is inactive and stored in any physical or digital form. This can be, for example, a database or a storage account, like we talked about before. Data in transit means that your data is in motion or is in use between components, locations, or programs. For example, when you copy your data from one VM to another one, or from one storage account to another storage account. So let us now take a look at Azure Key Vault. Azure Key Vault is a tool for securely storing and accessing secrets in Azure. You can see a secret as anything that you want to tightly control access to, such as API keys, passwords, or certificates. And you can see the Key Vault itself as a kind of logical group designed to store those secrets. You just need to keep in mind that it's not intended to store any user passwords and that it's available in two tiers. You have a standard and a premium. The difference between the two is that the premium also supports hardware security models or HSM protected keys, and next to the software protected keys, which are available to be stored in the standard. So the premium just has an extra option available. That's the big difference. And yeah, also the price is different. So data encryption at rest is also a good step towards better data privacy. And you can foresee this for a disk of your Azure IaaS VMs and the data on them by using Azure Disk Encryption, which enables you to encrypt your Windows and Linux IaaS VM disks. And to provide this volume encryption for the OS, not only the OS, but also for all data disks. Disk encryption uses the BitLocker feature for Windows and a decrypt feature for Linux VMs. In the back, it integrates with Azure Key Vault, and in this way, it can help you control and manage the disk encryption keys and all the secrets. You can use it for standard VMs or VMs with Azure Premium Storage. And one of the things in enable encryption at rest will also be shown as a recommendation in Azure Security Center. So also through Azure Advisor, but if you open Azure Security Center and you have deployed a lot of VMs and you didn't put disk encryption on it, you will probably see some recommendations like this. For me, it's now for 2 resources. If you have an environment with 50, probably 50 VMs will pop up. But that doesn't mean you need to use it, but it's a recommendation by Microsoft to implement disk encryption. Then you also have some features you can enable on your storage accounts to better protect them, like storage service encryption or SSE. SSE is enabled for all new and existing storage accounts and cannot be disabled because in this way your data is secured by default. So you don't need to modify your code or applications to start using SSE. It will automatically encrypt data in any Azure managed disk, any Azure blob storage, any Azure file, any Azure storage queue, or even any Azure storage table storage, for example. And it supports both performance tiers, so it supports standard and premium. And also it supports both deployment models. For people still working in the classic ASM, it's also supported. Next to that, you can use Microsoft managed encryption keys with SSE, or you can use your own encryption keys. In most environments where I'm working in, people just use the Microsoft managed ones. But yeah, maybe some of your customers or maybe your own environment, you want to use your own keys, it's possible. Another feature is secure transfer required. This one enhances the security of your storage account by enforcing all requests to your account through a secure connection. So if you want to use the API of the storage account, you can't use HTTP, for example. You should use HTTPS, otherwise you're not able to connect. And the thing you should know about it, that it's disabled by default. So if you want to use it, you need to enable it. And the last one I want to discuss is soft delete for blobs, which protects your data on a storage account from being modified or deleted. When it's enabled on a storage account, you can recover objects after they have been deleted. and this within a specific data retention period. So if you set it to 7 days and it's deleted, those data is stored for 7 days and you can recover it. This protection extends to any blobs like blobs or page blobs, and that are erased or as a result of an override. And you should know that all soft deleted data is built at the same rate as your active data. So if you have data stored in a storage account, you need to pay a specific price for it at the end of the month. During when it's in the retention period and it's still stored in the soft delete, you still need to pay for it for at least, if your retention is 7 days, you need to pay for it for at least 7 days. So a short demo. Let us go back to the Azure portal. Let me go to my storage accounts. So if we're opening the storage accounts, I have 3 of them at the moment, like you can see over here. If you take the DEM1, for example, if we want to enable, let me see, if we want to enable soft delete, you go to the blob service, you open up data protection, and you turn it on over here. Just click on it, save it. You can fill in your retention period, let us say 10 days. You click on save, and it's implemented. If you want to see the encryption, the SSE, you can see at the moment it's with the Microsoft keys for over here. If you want to use your own keys, you can click on this and you can fill it in, and you can even store them directly in the Azure Key Vault. If you ever want to, let me close this one. Okay, let's drop it. Let us open it again. If you want to ever change the replication of a storage account, but you need to do it before any data is stored on it, otherwise it doesn't work. You can do it over here. So at the moment, this storage account is LRS. I can change it to GRS and just save it. And it's at the moment, it's updating my storage account. If I go back, I need to wait for it. Okay, let me close this one. If I go to another storage account, this one has a file share on it. You can enable soft delete for a file share. You can do that over here. File share soft delete, just click on enable. Also, up to 365 days. Select the time period you want the soft delete to be used. Click on save, and it's applied. If you ever want to use the Storage Explorer from inside the Azure portal, just in the Storage Account blade, you can click on it over here. Storage Explorer, still in preview, you can click on it. Let me, for example, take the file share. You can see I have a folder on it, FS Demo. I can click on it. And you can see I have 2 PDFs located in there, and I can download it and directly connect to it from inside the Azure portal. So that's this demo. Let me go back to the slides. So let me share them again. So as a final topic of the day, I want to look on how you can securely connect to your Azure IaaS VMs. So like probably most of you know, the easiest way, but the least secure one to connect to an Azure VM is by using a public IP address or a PIP. In this way, you can connect to a VM through RDP on port 3389 or SSH on port 22, and this depending if the VM is a Windows or a Linux VM. This kind of way of connecting to your Azure IaaS VMs is good for studying purposes or when you need to do a quick test, but you should never use it in a production environment, because by using this way to connect, one or both management ports on the VM will be widely opened on the internet. Let me drink a little bit, sorry. And in this way, your VM can easily be breached with not only brute force attacks, but also by port scans or even zero-day exploits. So better is to connect to your Azure VMs in a high secure way. First of all, by using a site-to-site VPN or an ExpressRoute. And in this way, you can connect from your on-premises network to the private IP address of the VM. Next to those two options, you can also use a point-to-site VPN, and this to set up a secure connection to a VNet from an individual computer. With a point-to-site VM, you can use certificate-based authentication or radius, but these days you also have the option to use the Open VPN protocol or even to use Azure AD authentication instead of self-signed certificate. A resource I also see a lot being used in a production environment is a jump box or a jump host or jump server, like some people like to name it. A jump box is a server. You can see it as a controlled entry point in your Azure environment, which is used to access other devices in a separate security zone or in one of the spoke VNets if you're working in the hub-spoke model. When you use a jump box, it's best to enable just-in-time VM access or JIT for it, so you can control access and reduce the attack surface of this jump box. JIT is available when you use a standard tier of Azure Security Center. How does it work? First of all, a user needs to request access to a VM. Then Security Center will check if that user has role-based access permissions for that VM. If so, that request is approved, and then Security Center automatically configures the NSG to allow inbound traffic to, for example, one or both management ports like 3389 or 22 or some other ones. And this for the requested amount of time. When the time window is passed, Azure Security Center will automatically restore the NSG back to its previous states. And the nice thing about it is that you can see all those requests being reviewed, and you can review them in the activity log. So you can see who has access, when, how long did he have access. You can also see it in the activity log. These days, you can also use Azure Bastion to securely connect to your Azure VMs. Azure Bastion is a PaaS service that you provision inside your virtual network, and it provides secure and seamless RDP SSH connectivity to your virtual machines directly in the Azure Portal over SSL. So how does Azure Bastion works? Bastion lives in its own subnet, the Azure Bastion subnet in your VNet, which exposes only port 443 SSL to the internet. Through your Bastion host, you connect with RDP 3389 or SSH22 on the private IP address of the VM. And in this way, the VM itself doesn't need a public IP anymore. So you can directly work from inside the Azure portal and connect to your VMs directly on their internal IP. So maybe it's better to show it in a demo. So let me go back to the Azure portal. I once again go to the global search bar, type in Bastion, click on Bastion. You can see already deployed one before. If I go back, if I go to my virtual machines, let me type it in, click on virtual machines. You can see I have 4 VMs. Let me click on this one. You can see it doesn't have a public IP address. If I now want to connect to that specific VM through Azure Bastion, I just need to click on the connect button, choose Bastion. Yeah, click on use Bastion. It will open, type in the username. Let me type in my super secret username and then my super secret password. Let me type it in. Hope I typed OK, otherwise it will fail. You can see another tab is opened in my on my browser page, and you can see I'm RDP'd directly into the Windows VM, and I can do anything with it. The nice thing is I can also go to the full screen mode. I can also copy text from my desktop, for example. You still can't copy any files from your desktop into the Azure Bastion session. So hopefully Microsoft will adjust that on the future roadmap. This is for a Windows VM. You can also do it for a Linux VM. So this one, like you can see, is a Linux one and also doesn't have a public IP address. You can also click on Connect, click on Bastion, use Bastion again. Yeah, I have a Linux VM with the username and password. I don't use the SSH private key or something. So let me type in my username again, and then my super secret password. Click on Connect. You can see another tab is opened. And this one isn't working. Why isn't it working? Let me look at it. Was it running? Yeah, probably I typed in the wrong password. If the nice other thing is, if you go back to Bastion, let me go back over here. You click on this one. Under the settings, you go to sessions. And it will show all running sessions. The nice thing as an admin, you also have the option to kill a session. So you can just click on the delete one and the session is dropped. Let me now go back to my slides to close off. So before closing off, I just want to give you some key takeaways. 5 things you should really remember about this session. First of all, adapt the zero trust model and assume breach and verify each request as though it originates from an open network. Secondly, know that identity is a new security parameter and that you should really try to secure all your cloud identities. Third, implement a good Azure governance strategy to really remain in control of your Azure environments. 4, use all built-in Azure services and tools to better secure your environment, like, for example, Azure Advisor, Azure Security Center, Azure Service Health, and Azure Policy. And finally, never use a PIP to connect to your IaaS VMs. Better is to use a point-to-site VPN or through an ExpressRoute or a site-to-site VPN, a jump box with cheat enabled, or now these days with the PaaS service Azure Bastion. So that's it for my session for today. Dana, are there any questions at the moment?
There are a few, so I've taken notes down. I'm probably going to go through them as they were asked, if that suits. And if anyone else has any questions, please just pop them into the chat and I'll make sure to get to them. So the very first one at the beginning was, what do you mean by security posture? And that was asked by Andino.
So you need, a lot of people are not aware which attacks are happening in their environment. They don't have a broad overview. A security posture, you need to map your security. You need to take a look at it from overhead, like they say. I don't really know how to say it in English. You need to look at it like you look at your identities, and a lot of people these days, security is really important, but 10 years ago, nobody was looking at security. So you really need to map it and be aware of it and take a look at it like you look at all other aspects in your environment. That's kind of what I mean about it.
Cool. And our second question is, again, for Mandina. What does cost management do? So cost analysis and budget, yes, but what for?
So if you have a specific environment and at the end of the month, someone needs to pay a bill, Azure Cost Management is a free service, which you can open from the Azure Portal. And it can give you cost analysis. So for example, you're running different resources, and it can give you advice how much the resources are going to cost at the end of the month. So it helps you to make an estimate. It will also specify if you use it in combination with those tags, like I said. So you have that cost center tag where you put your different departments in. If you select in cost management, you can also in the cost analysis use those tags, and then you can list and map all resources which are pinpointed to that specific department and see how much they need to spend. And you can also set specific budgets, for example. So a specific department uses a specific resource group. with specific resources. You can set a budget of, let us say, €200 or $200 for US people. And then when a certain amount of that budget is already spent during the month, you can get alerted and you can be notified through email or something, or through something else. And then you can advise those people to start looking at those resources. Why are they costing that much? What are they doing in that specific resource group? It's a way to control all your costs. So there are different ways to do it. Azure Advisor, for example, is also integrated with the Azure Cost Management. So Azure, if you open the cost management blade, it will also show the Azure Advisor recommendations, like the one I showed in the demo, where at a public IP address that wasn't associated to any resource directly from in the Azure Cost Management blade, you can also delete that specific IP address, and it can save you money at the end of the month. So if you need to do anything cost related, you need to go to the Azure Cost Management blade, and it's a free tool to use. So, but it also depends which type of Azure subscription you have. Because if you're, for example, a CSP customer, you can't use Azure Cost Management, or an Azure plan should be enabled on top of it. So it really depends which type of subscription you have for the things you can use in the Azure Cost Management environment.
Cool. Thanks
but it's
for
fun.
that.
It's one of the topics I will discuss in a session later on. Because in my opinion, it's a really important tool to use also. But I didn't
sign up, guys.
Yeah.
The next two questions, so I think we might have to go back to the portal for them, so I'll come back to them after. Okay. Does Azure Key Vault have the 4 eyes principle?
I think it is, yeah. I don't really know what exactly mean with it.
Like the 2-person rule, I assume?
Okay. You can store everything. It's the only thing you can't store in it is user passwords. So I see some people building VMs, for example, and they want to have a local admin password, and they use it in that way. That's not really a good idea to use it in that way. Just use it to store. And a good thing to do also, if you have different environments, like you have a dev and a dev one, and you work in the hub-spoke model, and you have a dev spoke, a production spoke, and a pre-production spoke, for example, or Q&A, you need to create a key vault for each of them separated. That's the best practice, in my opinion. Because I see a lot of people using one vault for their complete environment, but try to split them up.
So would there be any sort of requirement in the Key Vault where it requires 2 separate individuals to approve of some action before something can be authorized? It
depends how you're using your Key Vault, and you can also set role-based access controls on your Key Vault. It really depends in which way you're using it. You can also combine it with managed identities, for example. You can simply use it to store one simple certificate, and then let a specific cloud application access it. It's something I will really go through in also one of the next sessions, because it's your vault in your Azure environment, in my opinion.
Cool. And what certification path would you recommend someone who wants to start getting certificates in Azure security?
What study, or what do you exactly mean?
I think so, like Microsoft Azure.
You have if you're not familiar with Azure, I always recommend to do the AZ 900, the fundamentals one. But if you really want to focus on security and these ones, you should look at the AZ 500. So it's a new version from August, and it will. There are some new features added, like they're also looking at container security and Kubernetes security. So if you want to get really started with security for your Azure environment, you can take a look at the AZ 500. But if that's the first Microsoft exam you're taking Azure related, it's probably going to be a huge one to study.
Yeah. And these 2 questions, I think you might have to pop into the portal. But Andino had asked to look at the security center, and Raju asked to look at data and use.
Yeah. So the security center, This one I'm using is the free one, so I didn't enable the standard one. You can enable the standard options for specific resources you're using. There's also one I'm going to talk a little bit deeper in a later on session. A nice thing to use is, for example, the secure score. So it will give you security recommendations for all your different subscriptions and what to do to get a higher score in that. So it's not, the point is not to get 100% like Microsoft wants, but it can really help you. So if I do it for my production environment, for example, I have my production subscription. For the moment, my secure score is 38%. And if I want to uplift my score, I can implement all these specific recommendations. So the best part to start with Azure Security Center is, first of all, you need to enable it. You have to have a log analytics workspace, and then start with the secure score and try to, something like MFA. If you're not enabled, it's not enabled in your environment, it probably will give you 20 points extra and your secure score will go up quite easy. But most of the things I've already implemented. For my VMs, I didn't do anything because in the next session, I want to show how you can enable it directly from over here. It's the same principle as the Azure Service Health and the Azure Advisor. If you click on a recommendation, there are those quick fixes. If you click on something like that quick fix, it will directly go to the right place in your Azure environment to get it fixed.
Okay, cool. I think that's all the questions, unless, do you guys have anything else you want to pop into the chat?
But Security Center itself is something you can talk about hours, I think.
Perfect. So basically, everyone should just listen to all the sessions if you want Wim to expand on everything. So Andino just asked again, would Sentinel be another tab on the left of this menu?
You can edit, if you have the specific, you can edit. So if you want to open it, if he's using Sentinel at the moment, but that's also something I think you can cover in a full session only focused on Sentinel, I think, because that's the extra layer on top of your complete Azure security. So my point was starting off with some basics. And I think I didn't touch, for example, network security, but I think Faiba already did a session focused on all Azure network-related resources, and it tackled NSGs, application security groups, and Azure Firewall. So I was thinking I don't need to do that again because it's already covered. So, but probably one of the sessions I will tackle those one also a little bit compacter than maybe Viba did, but it's something you can't work around if you're thinking about security. And Azure Sentinel is also a nice one. So I don't know if the people are using the Azure Global Search Bar. The nice thing is, if you're not familiar with working with a specific Azure resource and you just type in the name, you can see the Azure documentation pages are right shown on the right. So if you click those, you can directly go to the Azure Sentinel documentation and docs, the Microsoft docs. Another nice feature for people who's not that familiar with Azure and start working with Azure, if you go back again in the global server, type in Quick Start, you can go to the Quick Start Center. And then, for example, you want to learn how to create a web app. There are little projects you can click on Start. And then it will really explain you how to set up a specific web app in Azure step by step directly from inside the Azure portal. So for people start learning Azure, that's also a nice way to start and to use. And I think a lot of people are not aware that's inside the Azure portal at the moment, those things.
That's perfect. Does anybody else have any other questions? Cool. So I think that's it. Thanks so much, Wim. That was a great session. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here. So I know we've been throwing quite a few links at you guys. So this is just a recap. If you haven't registered and you want to get your resources relevant to this session, please do scan this QR code or click that link there. And we'll be sharing the resources shared by Wim on our GitHub soon. And in the next few days, we'll be uploading this session on our YouTube channel just so you can refer back. We're having our upcoming sessions. So there's one on Power Platform that's actually kicking off with its very first session as well on Monday. And of course, Wim is going to be joining us again on Friday to present more on this. And there seems to be a lot of questions. So I feel like you guys should definitely come back. And again, we'd really appreciate it if you could provide us some feedback on this session using that last link. It's very short. And thank you so much, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Yeah, and if they have any other questions, they can always contact me through my Twitter handle, for example, by the way.
Perfect.
So
thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for following.